Imp in state of nature never jerks off, but in captivity does. What does this mean? What does this mean?
What does this mean indeed?
So,
Um,
we have decided he is a guest on your guys' podcast, which has just started leading for a second, to do a video on the Bronze Age mindset and the writer of the book, Bronze Age Pervert. You guys could nice meme fryer illustrate to us who that is?
Bap is a very good guy. He is a lover of widows and orphans, and he is one of the nicest and kindest men I've ever known. And he is, for some reason, widely hated by Nick Futanari and his people. I don't know why, but yeah, Nick Fuentes and the America First people just hate him.
Yeah,
Um,
so we're not gonna
yeah.
make this episode about Nick Futanari, but
Well, this is just an introductory passage, right? So
yeah, but I'm just gonna say, Serp and I aren't exactly fans of Nick Futanari either.
I,
Uh,
I did
I
not.
don't
I did not
know how much
say.
of a not. I just am kind of neutral on the subject.
Yeah, I mean I am too, but it's really funny to call him Futanari.
Yeah,
It's look, it's an inside joke within an inside joke.
yeah. So the thing is, right, is that I don't like Nick Futanari. I don't like him in the slightest, and I find his gang members equally annoying. Um, I think it's probably because, well, as an older millennial, well, would I be classified as an older millennial or as a younger one? Because as born,
You're a younger one. An older millennial would be born in the 80s.
well, yes, well, again, as
So,
a
like, the very oldest millennial is like the AVGN, or is he the end of Gen X?
oh, okay,
He's oldest millennial, I would say.
Okay.
okay,
I say millennial is 1980 to 2000, but it's all kind of arbitrary anyway.
yeah,
Yeah, some people set them at fives because World War II ended at 65, so it's like baby boomer is 45 to 65, Gen X is 65 to 85, um, a millennial is
Anyway,
85
anyway,
to
that
like
doesn't really matter.
yeah.
2005.
Let's go on to total bronze death.
Ah, no. So uh, what I'm saying is that, maybe as a younger millennial myself, I don't like the um cultish effect that the younger people in what's his face's circles, in Nick circles,
Futanari.
yeah, have appear to have succumbed to now, nominally at least, right? I mean, you would expect me as a Catholic, and, well, yourselves too as Catholics, to support someone who claims to be Catholic, and but that's actually not the case. I mean, I guess I'm more vitalist than I'm Catholic. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah.
Who is Bab?
Okay. Okay. So to get back to the question. Now, if his docs is to be believed, he is a Romanian philosopher who studied at Yale and now lives somewhere in the what's his what yeah, somewhere
New
in the East
England?
Coast. Yeah. Yeah, somewhere on the East Coast. Now, um uh a lot of the people on the Nick Futanari circles have said, claim that Bap is Jewish, but I have it on good authority that Bap is Romanian Orthodox from people who actually know him. and have met up with him.
Although he is definitely heavily involved in the promotion of Zionism and things like that. But that's honestly, that is really not important to us. We're really focused on what his beliefs are. We just wanted to get the whole Jewish thing out of the way.
Yeah.
I really, it doesn't matter if he's Jewish.
No, it doesn't. What matters is his ideas.
What matters is his plan. Yeah. So so what would you say his ideas are? I mean, if you had to say it, what would you say it is? What would you
So
say his ideas are?
his general thesis. So he's clearly a scholar of Nietzsche, whether or not the docs is true. Clearly, he's highly influenced by Nietzsche, and I have some experience of reading Nietzsche in preparation for this. I listened through Beyond Good and Evil. I've read through Antichrist. I've read kind of a few summations of his work. I've read parts of Das Spoke Zarathustra. So maybe
Uh-huh.
I'm not the most well read on Nietzsche, but um, my understanding of Nietzsche is he's an antinomianist, ethicist first and foremost. Um, he's largely arguing for um, a world without a traditional set of ethics or morality, where a strong elite handful of people will basically do whatever that they want, and they'll be able to kind of govern society and lead the rest of humanity on. And in order to do so, he basically kind of like abandons metaphysics. He doesn't even he basically sacrifices metaphysics on the altar of his antinomianism, and Bap's philosophy, while decidedly more right wing than many interpretations of Nietzsche, largely is inspired by Nietzsche's work, and as such is antinomian. And so I think that it's a pretty toxic thing for any person of the right, Christian or even non-Christian, to believe in, because antinomianism, which is, I don't know if I can define it the best, maybe you guys could define it better. It basically is the idea that there is no morality, that do as you please kind of ethics. Is that fair, or do you guys have a more holistic definition of it?
I mean, you can have a more comprehensive definition, but it's not really necessary. Here, it is true that he has a very left-hand path kind of antinomian worldview. Um, for example, in his interpretations of Buddhism, he's a very big fan of Tibetan Buddhism, which does have an antinomian and left-hand path tradition.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh okay, so Terilien, tell me what you think about, or tell us what you understand eh, when you say left hand path and antinomian.
It means not following the strictures of traditional morality
Uh-huh.
while on the path to enlightenment
Enlightenment, or yeah.
or salvation or what
Yeah,
have
yeah,
you,
yeah,
but transgressing against it
yeah.
and attaining enlightenment and the like through those means. Through those means.
Right. So my take on Nietzsche as a moralist, um and as a cultural critic, is that he shoots himself in the foot. Right? I mean, I would say that Nietzsche is first and foremost a polemicist, a stylist, and not a very systematic thinker, right? Um, this isn't to say that he doesn't have a background philosophy, but he does, but at the same time, because he refuses to place his idea of mankind, to place his man in eternity, right? um or make any reference to the transcendent and the immanent godhead. His spiritual foundation of culture is wanting. It's very wanting. It's very human. Now, if we were in the Garden of Eden, if we were in the prelapsarian state, maybe Nietzsche, Nietzsche would have worked. But as we are now, it doesn't really. I mean, I don't see it working. I don't really see him working. Would you agree?
Ye- yeah.
Um,
I let's just focus on what Bronze Age mindset is about, and not just get too carried away with the complexities of Nietzsche's thought. I'll just summarize: Nietzsche is trash. He is completely and utterly worthless as a philosopher, and I don't even concede that his views are a good criticism of contemporary Protestantism. All he really does, okay, is commit the genetic fallacy and propose an origin for Christianity. And he treats that origin or genealogy of Christianity as an argument against it, which it wouldn't be. And on top of that, it's a false genealogy. And I honestly think you have some Christians on the right who try to say oh, he's actually right about contemporary Protestantism. And it's like, I don't even concede that. Contemporary Protestantism in Germany was still pretty healthy. People
Mhm.
still went to church. People were right wing. People were based. It's just a bunch of bullshit. Nietzsche is worthless. No one should waste any time reading his books unless they speak German and they have an interest in his poetry for some reason. But
so
that's the only reason to read Nietzsche. Anyway, I'm gonna let Sir go on.
I believe that Nietzsche actually has a pretty coherent philosophy and worldview. It's mostly dedicated to ethics. He kind of negates most metaphysics by the will to power, and his metaphysics is kind of summated in the will to power. But Nietzsche writes in a very non-direct way through. I'm gonna mispronounce it here, as I'm famous for, through aphorisms, poetry, and parables. And because of that non-direct way, and he says so himself, leads himself greatly towards interpretation. I mean, he's been read in numerous ways, but I think that he holds a pretty consistent, if you read through all of them, world system, and he's mainly a philosopher of ethics. The thing is that he is by no means systematic. He never presents his ethical system and defends it. Largely, he criticizes other ethical systems and religions, most prominently Christianity, Judaism, and Buddhism, as well as the systems of Stoicism, utilitarianism, and Kant's deontological ethics,
Uh-huh.
um, through strawmans and ad hominem attacks. Nietzsche is an incredibly talented person as a writer. Of course, me and Terilien are native English speakers. Nice meme fryer, you don't speak German, right? Terilien can speak some German, but even within English, it becomes pretty apparent he's a very he's very good
He's
in his
a
prose.
yeah, he's a very talented prose stylist.
He's an
But
overrated philosopher and an underrated poet.
yes, so the thing about it is that he's just a very good writer,
Yeah.
but his criticisms of Christianity, I mean, very seldom does he even perform the genetic fallacy. Most of the time, he just attacks his opponents through ad hominem attacks. He doesn't really systematically present his own philosophy, let alone debate his philosophy vis-a-vis other philosophies. He's very lazy in terms of being a philosopher. He's just a very good writer in presenting it. And do you guys want to get into the book, Bronze Age Mindset, now that we kind of laid the foundation of its influence?
I think we laid enough groundwork, if you can call it that.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we go about it now? Like, do we want to? So, have you read Bronze Age Mindset? I mean, I know you have, sir, but have you read it, Terilien?
You should
Oh,
give your one sentence review you gave to
okay,
the
I'll give you my
late
review of
Paladin.
Bronze Age Mindset. Bronze Age Mindset, okay, is like a gay bodybuilder cracking open your skull and shitting his AIDS-infested feces into it. Okay, that is what breeding Bronze Age Mindset was like for me. It is the most metaphysically homosexual thing I have ever read in my entire life. It is on a fundamental level just the gayest shit ever. And I am not going to have much. I'm not really going to have anything really constructive and productive to say here. I'm mostly just here for, well, sorry for being a hypocrite, but I'm mostly here for the ad hominems. But I'm going to keep those to a minimum.
Okay, so
Serp has read it more thoroughly than I have and more recently. It is not a good book. Both in terms of its contents being just kind of disgusting, its organization, its style, and the fact that a lot of it is just warmed over Malthusianism. A lot of it is just outright false or made up. Yeah.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. And I get, well, I'm not going to say that I see where you're coming from, because what you're saying is objectively does objectively apply, because it's not a very it's not very systematically laid out. I mean, he doesn't really tell us Bab doesn't really tell us what it is that he believes. We have to
He
wade.
does tell us what he believes.
I think he
repeatedly.
does very clearly tell us what he
And
believes.
people, they like to pretend that he doesn't tell us who he is. But when he says he's a Bronze Age pervert, I mean, that's just a very good description of the kind
I
of.
mean, do you want? I'm going to read what I found to be one of the least flattering book passages in the book, where he describes his life. My favorite thing is to walk around the city during the day completely plastered, on very crowded streets or on a boardwalk by Cedar River. With a container, maybe it looks like iced tea or water, but it's actually full of alcohol. At night, I don't enjoy it as much, but during the day, I walk around in a state of great enthusiasm and energy, powered by liquor, or best of all, some kind of wine that energizes you to a great and holy rage. I don't really mean rage because I'm laughing on the inside, but I love to walk around like this, to see people, to accost strangers in all kinds of ways. Nothing is more entertaining. I've often wondered at these times what it would be like and how blessed life would be like if I could feel this way all the time and not just when I'm drunk. And I also never pay the price for it. Alcohol should never, by the way, be used as a stress relief, because after it crashes and even the next day there is a rise in cortisol, so that the unpleasant feelings become worse. But I wondered what it would be like to feel like this all the time, and there must be or have been people who do. Aren't we told this world is full of mutants? Why not a mutant who is perpetually full of this kind of euphoria? But even more, why not just set of emotions or one emotion? I wondered at these times how life could be if you were possessed only by specific feeling. If there's a man who has only felt the purest and most intense anger continually, and nothing else, or who felt only a very specific kind of joy and no other feeling. Even sadness of certain kinds makes life beautiful and can be a spur of great things. Even panic is better than the numbness promoted in our time. What would a creature who only ever felt such a thing be like, and why can't one exist? It would be a monster or a god, or any case, he would be possessed by a god. So basically, Bap, what is best in life? Being drunk in public.
Best. Okay, can I just say what this reminds me of?
Go
Uh,
ahead.
reminds me of the scene in the Matrix where, um, like right at the beginning, where Neo's friend says, "Mescaline is the only way to fly." That's 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 what this reminds me of. Like, I do, believe me, I do completely understand, and I know exactly what Bap is talking about, because there have been times in my life when my allerg when my um sinuses were so swollen and my allergies were so bad that I had to take like 10 milligrams of antihistamine, and when that didn't work, I had to take like 10 more milligrams. And then, because I had to work that same evening, I would drink a can of Monster, and then I would walk around the city, right, in like the dead of night, right, wide awake but knocked out. And I know it's not a very healthy thing, but believe me, I do understand exactly where Bab is coming from. Like, when he says even panic is better than the numbness promoted in our time, I feel precisely what he's talking about. I'm not defending him, but I mean, there's nothing to defend here, because he's just saying what he does. Like, he wouldn't say that this is a this is a particularly, moral course of action that he's taken. It's just that.
Well, that's a very, very, very charitable
I
reading.
think that's very generous.
Oh, okay. Well, look, man, what can I do? I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, and as a result, I love Bap. So, um, I'm just saying that there's certain expansive nobility that I see in Bap that I don't see in a lot of other people, and I love him because of it.
I just feel that he doesn't. I feel that the right wing, or I don't know if the right wing is even a good thing. What is good in life is, in Aristotelian sense, is virtue, and that's kind of what I believe in terms of ethics. So when he's saying that, like, the greatest amount of fun that one can have is being drunk in public, I really don't. I think that clearly promotes kind of like an antinomian view, maybe even a trollist view of life, and it just doesn't come across as very serious to me. It just comes across as like he's not really. I mean, maybe there's something to be said about the non-seriousness of it, but it just comes across as he doesn't really promote like ethics that well
No,
in
no,
any real
no.
sense.
He doesn't, because he doesn't. Um, because he never claimed to. That's the thing, right? I mean, if you read the next passage, um, yeah. So this was, I think, exhortation number 21. If you go to exhortation number 22, he says, "Do you imagine that men of genius, or let's say men of science in history, walk around clear headed, disenchanted, reasonable, with the tight assed attitude of the science cultist and materialist? No great discovery has ever been made by the power of reason. Reason is a means of communicating imperfectly some discoveries to others. And in the case of the sciences, a method of trying to render this communication certain and precise. but no one ever made a discovery through syllogisms, through reason, through this makeshift form of transmission. Great mathematicians saw spatial relationships, and great physicists saw and to some extent felt physical relations. In contemplation of mathematical forms, there is almost a physical feel of geometric relations, and all mathematics at bottom is about geometric relations, even when it doesn't seem so. Compare the compare the Euclidean proof of the Pythagorean theorem based on syllogism, which helps you understand nothing that's actually going on, with the imagistic proof of the three squares that makes you physically perceive, even in your body, why this theorem is true. Um, does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's a bit misleading, but it does make sense. I do
It
know what he's talking about. I mean, mathematically speaking,
Yeah.
it is
uh,
true that we get the principles, a lot of our axiomatic principles uh, from visual intuition, which we then reframe in more abstract terms so that we can more easily prove and extend and generalize it.
yes, yeah, exactly.
Although
So
he is definitely underselling uh, the value of syllogism and logic
of
in that
of
process and in that
of
extension. But
course
anyway,
he is,
we're
because
kind of getting off track here.
I think we should go back to what is Bronze Age Mindset as a book and what its an impact coming out of was.
Mhm.
So Bronze Age Mindset came out in 2018.
and
Think
I read it in
that
2019, I think, in like
yeah, so I just listened through the audiobook because I was trying to, even though I run a YouTube channel and I guess it's kind of like a right-wing YouTube channel, I kind of mostly just read history and schizo stuff. I really like schizo stuff, as the last podcast I was on here with you guys about. And I don't read a lot of like right-wing ideological stuff, so I figured that I would try and catch up, read Moldbug, read Hoppa, and I read BAP, and
Hopper.
immediately on Hoppa's great. It's just unfortunate that he is 98% of wonderful writing is poisoned by the 2% of anarcho-capitalism. It's just sad. But getting back to the topic, I read Bronze Age Mindset is one of the things that catch up on. I know I'm 5 years late to the party, but I read it and I was like, ooh, this is very Twitter. This is like a book of memes. This is basically I mean, maybe some of it was probably written before Twitter started getting wiped, but this
Yes,
seems
yeah.
to be very set in stone before the Twitter wipe of what right-wing Twitter was like. He constantly uses like phrases and nomenclature of the right wing on Twitter and 4chan at the time, which even by 2023 is kind of like, I don't know if like a person in the right wing sphere 5 years later wouldn't necessarily be aware of what certain of these the nomenclature would be. He also writes he has a stylistic choice of is it articles that he drops of using Grug speak, and it just
He
kind
does
of.
do that, yeah.
And if I actually listened to the audiobook initially, which Adam Smith made, which is the guy that is on the Myth of the 20th Century podcast, which is a
Yeah.
very good podcast. He
Which
did
is
that
which is
audiobook.
actually very good, yeah.
It's a very good audiobook.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that Bap misspells a lot of stuff within the book itself. So the way that he uses profanity, he uses dated slang, and the use of the Grug speak really, to me, has a pretty suitish, and maybe that's right-wing slang of the same time, kind of like outlook. It just feels really suitish and like forced to me. I don't. What do you guys think of the stylistic choices in the writing?
Oh, it's awful. It makes it
Um,
unreadable for me.
Terilien says that, and he's the one who spells Wednesday as Wednesday. So
Yeah, because I think over the anyway. Yeah.
I'm just saying, Terilien, that you could be a little kinder to Bap, bro. But you know what? That's fine. I don't like the people you like, and you don't have to like the people I like. Okay, so that's fine.
What do
And
you think of the stylistic choices yourself?
I think it's funny as fuck.
It should be said. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's quaint and charming, but I mean that's probably because I have a soft spot for Bap. I mean, yeah, like that's probably it.
Do you think that the use of slang has not aged well,
Now
or
that
do you
is
defend that?
that is a very germane question um because the thing about because the thing about um because the thing about the book is that it's very very clear from the way he writes is that Bap is a very intelligent man who is pretending to be a grog. It's kind of like when friendly Brian, right? Knight's a relative, friendly Brian. You know the person of whom I speak, right? Um, it's
Friendly
like
Baratheon, you mean?
yes, friendly
Officer
Baratheon.
friendly.
Yes, officer
Yeah.
friendly. Yes, it's like when he does grog speak. Like you can tell just how intelligent he is. However, because Bap doesn't really refer to any particular meme per se, because it's simply a stylistic choice. It's it's at a far lesser risk of becoming outmoded than it would otherwise have been had it spoken of had it made references to specific memes like peanut butter jelly time or tricks are for kids or whatever. No, but Terilien, I think Terilien had a lot to say about how Bap interprets Malthus. Like,
Do you want to get into the concept stage of this? I had
Yeah.
um,
Malthus's
Yeah,
the
let's get
Malthus
into the concept
interpretation as
stage.
two.
before we do that, I just want to make a preliminary remark, if I may. That the the worst thing is that there's a very strong part of me that does call for the nuclear cleansing of South India and and of certain parts of equatorial Africa, um, which I have to keep balanced against my chosen Catholic faith. And I think the sooner we recognize that BAP isn't bound by bound by the same moral choices, that we will come to a better understanding of
Well,
why he
my
says what he
quick
says.
response to that before we
Yeah,
go into the concept stage
yeah,
is no one is going to be nuclear cleansing Africa. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, the this shit that like a lot of white nationalists will talk about and think about is really just a fantasy on their part, and it's
I know,
delusional that they think that they're ever going to be in a position to enact
I know, I know,
TND.
I know. I know.
And so
I'm
it's just
saying,
really, really ridiculous to risk your soul and hate Catholicism because it imposes strictures against something you're never even going to be able to do.
Exactly. That's
A lot
exactly
of
what it's
these
coming to.
Baptists, and I'm not talking about BAP here, I'm talking about Baptists.
Yeah.
They're just nerds in their basements who are LARPing as Chads online.
Uh-huh.
And it's I mean, I've often said this about the whole concept of the Overman. Removing the strictures of Christianity isn't going to give you the Overman. It's just going to give you the last man, or rather, the Overman is the last
man. Yeah.
They're the same people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nietzsche,
Well-
at the end of the day, his protestations to the contrary is
Yeah.
all about shoving shit up your ass. And how and the death of God allows you to shove stuff up your ass really, 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 really far. And people, they try to make it into this beautiful thing, and it's really just going to lead to more butthole pleasures. Anyway,
I mean, look.
look, who's the real successor of Nietzsche? Evola or Foucault?
Foucault.
Yes, it's Foucault.
It's like without a doubt, it's Foucault. But
Let's go to the concept stage.
Yeah, sure. Do it.
Sir?
Do it, bitch.
I think that the first one that you need to start out with, because it's the most important to the entire book, is the glorification of youth and his concept of vitality. So he kind of morally measures the world aesthetically in the Nietzschean sense as the greatest triumph is good aesthetics, and part of good aesthetics is vitality or liveliness, and as such, one of the highest forms of creation is the human being taking control or mastering his environment. He compares humans to predators,
I'm the
such
predator
as a tiger, or is human beings work like predators, which he also compares them as very beautiful creatures which control their environment. And so he kind of spaces out what I mean, I made a joke of BAP, what is best in life, getting drunk in public. But really what he thinks is best in life is taking control of your environment, control over space. Thoughts on that?
He sees one of his one of the most interesting things about Bronze Age mindset is that he doesn't believe in Darwinism, which is very unexpected.
Yeah.
But he doesn't believe in Darwinism because he believes that the idea that the goal of all life is spreading itself doesn't properly account for the behavior of many life forms.
That's right.
And that what they're actually interested in and what the fundamental goal of life is not the acquisition, is not reproduction per se, but the acquisition of space. And that reproduction as such as the goal of life is the property of yeast. And he will repeatedly use yeast as a kind of metaphor for very lowly forms of life, like the Chinese, in his mind, which act only to reproduce and replicate itself and persist and exist without caring about the acquisition of space and, in his view, their own flourishing, which I think ties very closely into the very strong Malthusian bet that the book has.
Yeah. And by space, he space obviously includes resources and such. I mean, that goes without saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you guys want to lead into the Malthusian aspect?
I'll just say that there's a very, very strong current of the worship of youth throughout the book.
Yeah.
And the worship of beauty, specifically as embodied in teenage Greek boys and statues thereof, often known as in the literature as kouroi, which means young men. He is absolutely homosexually obsessed with Kuroi, to an inordinate degree. It's actually kind of comical.
It is kind of funny, yeah. I'm not gonna lie, it is actually kind of funny. Um, yes, he does. He does. Bap does seem to be attached inordinately to the idea of youth, and I think I think he was who was he channeling? I mean, he was probably referring to someone um in one of his recent Twitter posts. I think I'm not exactly sure where, but he was talking about how the most beautiful thing that one can do is to leave behind a beautiful corpse. Um, Now, the thing about corpses is that they rot, and the thing about youthful bodies is that they age and muscles break down. Um, they begin to wrinkle and whatnot. Um, so as a Catholic and as a as a as someone who doesn't have these attachments, it's very difficult for me to understand where this um inordinate attachment to the beauty of youth comes from, because it's very strange to me. I don't get it. Terilien will probably say that it's profoundly homosexual. I mean, that
No, I mean
may.
I get it. It's just a very 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 shallow way of living your life, basically.
Um,
Oh,
I mean, everybody's doomed to age. You either are going to accept that and understand kind of like the perennial values as being important, or you're not going to accept that. And I think a lot of our society is actually screwed up from baby boomers being unable to accept their own aging.
yes,
And that
that's true. That's true. Yeah,
they've kind of screwed up our society
yeah,
because they're so attached to their youth, even as they're entering their 60s.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of them still hate their parents for not letting them start a rock band or whatever.
So, like, Terilien knows this better than anyone, but I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love bodybuilders, and I watch like 80s action movies all the time. Right? There is nothing I find m- as aesthetically pleasing as a well-oiled um, Scandinavian torso. I'm speaking in particular of Dolph Lundgren, right? Nothing I find as aesthetically pleasing as that. However, I don't hate my grandpa or my father for not being that. I don't hate myself for not being that person. I recognize that there are other types and varieties of beauty as well. Um, uh, it is it is that it is that it is that a lack of it is that lack of theoretical kindness, because I don't know, because at the same time, Bap doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who would be mean to his own mom or to his own grandma or to random old ladies on the street. So I'm gonna say the theoretical kindness and the theoretical acceptance of old age and widowhood and whatnot. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about the Malthusian aspect of it, Terlian? I mean,
So a fundamental thread that you find throughout the book
Uh-huh.
is an idealization of, for example, nomadic populations, um, warlike hunter gatherers, but especially pastoralists and Bronze Age pastoralists and stuff like that. And there's an extreme aversion to things like population growth and reproduction, and the idea that life is about having a family, because it fundamentally hurts the standard of living of people who live in, these lower population density sorts of areas.
Yeah.
It's actually very, very, very prominent, but it's sort of suffused throughout the book.
It
Now,
is.
I'm going to say something about Malthusianism. Malthus was mostly right, especially before the Industrial Revolution. But there's a misunderstanding that sees Malthus as promoting like contraception and the like. He didn't.
He
He
did
was
not.
just describing reality.
Yeah.
Um, Malthus just believed that, population has a tendency to outstrip resources. He just didn't really predict that we would have a sexual revolution nor an industrial revolution.
Exactly. So he had no idea that the Malthusian trap would be overcome. Is
Temporarily.
well, temporarily, yes, but the Industrial Revolution has been holding strong so far. So like we've been,
Yeah.
yeah, like there have in fact been multiple agricultural revolutions. The most recent one due to the efforts of Norman Borlaug, but our listeners already know all of that. So sorry, no, please go on.
I think it's just really important. So, to left wing environmentalists, or I mean, maybe to non left wing environmentalists as well, Malthus has become this like right wing figure, which is anti human. And he's just like this pessimist that believes that like population growth will collapse society, and so on. And he's kind of like anti population growth. It's important to kind of like note that Malthus' description of carrying capacity in the ecological sense applied to human beings, he views that as a very tragic thing, and it's a very tragic fate that human beings meet their population cap and can't exploit the nature that much more and are held back by this population cap.
Uh-huh.
And Bap's kind of Malthusianism isn't actually Malthus's Malthusianism. It's just a criticism of overpopulation as strangling to kind of his interpretation of the will to power and the will, Nietzsche's affirmation of life, because he views the affirmation of life as being lived as an individual rather than reproduction and the family.
Yes, and it sort of feeds into his whole idea that life is about acquiring space,
Yeah.
that that's the fundamental goal of life. Naturally, things like population growth and the like get in the way of that. And that's part of the reason why he signals very, very strongly against the people in our circles who think that, our primary goal should be family formation and the like.
Yeah.
Um,
Because he wants us to escape the longhouse. Yes. Yes.
and that
He
plays,
he wants us to escape Yenta. Yes.
and there's a very, very, very strong tendency among Baptists to dismiss, family formation as just trapping men
Yeah.
in the longhouse, which is a very interesting construct of his.
Yes.
Because what he's basically done is he's taking Maria Gimbutas. So Maria Gimbutas is the person who came up with the Kurgan hypothesis, which is the hypothesis that the Indo-European speakers, the original ones, came from the steppe. Now we know that this is true, like 99% certainty.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But
Yes. Yes. It's my.
Maria
It's my
Gimbutas also
homeland. It's my homeland, bitch. It's my homeland. No, please. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah, so Maria Gimbutas also came up with this idea that the Europeans, before the Indo-Europeans invaded, were matriarchal and very peaceful and wonderful hippies. And she thinks that this is a good thing. Now, of course, she's full of shit. Firstly, there were probably about 20 to 30 separate language families in Europe before the Indo Europeans came in.
Yeah.
There was no single old European culture. Secondly, while there is some evidence of matrilineal um, descent and households and the like in
Uh-huh.
Europe before the Indo European invasion, there isn't really much evidence that that was the dominant pattern. And there's certainly no evidence that these societies were in any way matriarchal. But what BAP has sort of done is he's taken this idea and he's called it the Longhouse, and he's reified it as like this is what most of human history was until heroic people like Indo-Europeans overthrew it. So he's taking what Maria Gimbutas says, her construct, and then he's saying, yeah, it's real, but it's a good thing that the Indo-Europeans came and imposed patriarchy. Which, I mean, if they did impose patriarchy, then great, but it never really existed. This kind of gynocracy is not something that existed. It's sort of like a myth that he's created
I mean, this is
as part
actually
of his exhortation.
like this is part of the Maria Gimbutas is part of the same people who would have us believe in Wicca and all of that shit, right?
Yeah, she's related to that stuff. She's more sophisticated than that, but yes.
She's more sophisticated than Dan Brown, yeah, but that's a very low bar.
So,
So,
yeah, she's
I,
part of the people who created this idea of the mother goddess.
Yeah.
But there was this primordial mother goddess that human beings worshipped before one, the Jews, and two, the Indo Europeans came along and brought patriarchy to the world.
Yeah.
And one of the common Baptist refrains is "This has always been the enemy," and they post a picture of that mother goddess, whether it be
It's
a
one of the
fat
funniest
woman,
things ever.
whether it be a fat woman, an image of the Venus of Willendorf, or an image of Magna Mater from ancient Rome, or what have you. Anyway, I'm gonna let Serp continue.
I think to go kind of zoom out from this, the Longhouse is kind of what he defines as a gynocracy or woman rule, which is the rule of older women trying to destroy young men and kind of sterilize them. And he sees the ultimate gynocracies as like East Asian society. Is that fair to say is how he views
That is
the opposition?
that is he does point to East Asia a lot, but then he has said, like, he keeps on saying, right, that the life of the East has been the default state of mankind for about as long as mankind has lived,
Mhm.
right?
And he kind of like uh he kind of he does use the word Oriental despotism. He kind of
He
points
does.
towards the 19th century concept of Orientalist concept of East Asian societies, or I mean, I guess it goes outside of East Asian societies into the Middle East and India as well, as like Oriental despotism, and he kind of has this cartoonish hatred of East Asians. I mean, which goes so far as to like he thinks that like Africans are like a natural ally against East Asian influence and stuff like that.
Well, only some kinds of Africans. Like, he has no love for the West African, certainly. um yeah. I don't really understand where he um gets the, well, I mean, Like I come from, well, I don't come from East Asia, but I do come from South Asia, and I don't really know if we have ever had like a matriarchy here. If anything, like the gynocracy in the West, the HR regimes is much worse than anything we have back home.
I mean, even in very, very putrid peasant societies, you've never really had anything approaching a gynocracy. What you have is a bunch of people who are poor, essentially, and their lives are miserable, mostly because they're poor. Um, and they're living under, a relatively despotic government sometimes.
Right.
And but they're still fairly patriarchal societies in which, and in many of these societies, the patriarch holds power of life and death over his subjects. Um, or, the father often has the right to sell his kids and stuff like that. It's extremely rare for the mother to have any formal authority. I'm sure Bap would actually acknowledge this, but then he would say that they wield like a lot of tyrannical influence. And I
Which is
will
true.
I
Which is
will
true. Which
give
is which is which
I
is
will give Bap some credit here. He does point out that the whole idea of like, oh, we should live in extended family, multi-generational households thing is frankly absolutely horrible and
Yeah.
absurd,
Yeah.
because you just end up under the tyranny of busybodies and mothers-in-law, and there's tons of conflict. Not to mention, and this isn't something Bat mentions, but it also happens to be the case that kids are much more likely to be sexually abused in overcrowded multi-generational households. That's just,
That's
yeah,
the way it is.
that's the way it is, because
Is that true? Like,
yes,
I mean,
because
Yes.
distant relatives don't share the same incest taboo.
I mean, so there's an inborn, I think it's inborn, anti-incest sense between immediate family members, mother, father, and siblings. But once you go to uncles and first cousins, that taboo that is not as naturally
There's no
inborn.
inborn taboo. The taboo against that is basically invented by Christianity.
oh, okay.
I mean, other cultures have had similar taboos. Like in China, for example, there's a very strong taboo against marrying someone who has the same surname as you. So you're not supposed to marry people from the same patrilineal family. That's how they manage incest. And you have similar things, but the point is that there is no inbuilt biological incest taboo once you get past the immediate family level.
Um, so I mean, there's some goodness in the sense of like there is criticism you can have of nursing homes, but with the population declining, and if you live in a place like America, Australia, Canada, uh, multi-generational households are just kind of stupid, and that the reason that people can't afford houses, young couples can't afford houses that are building families, is I mean, that's something that the right should be against, because that's just exploitation from the fire industry. There's no reason whatsoever that it should be out of reach for people in their late 20s and early 30s that are building families not to be able to buy houses.
Right.
Anyway.
In a place like America, Australia, New Zealand, and even to a certain extent, Europe.
Anyway, so I think just to summarize this section, BAP has this view that most of human history has been characterized by something called the Longhouse and by people living a very Bugman-like existence, which is not entirely wrong.
It is philosophy and not history, to be fair to him
Most
as
of
well.
human history, people have been desperately poor. And, your average peasant, in Samaria was not exactly living an empowered or particularly masculine life. Although I will say that a lot of peasants throughout history, like a lot of scrawny looking peasants are unbelievably physically strong people.
You only have to look at the Gorkhas to know just how true that is.
Yeah, even like stunted peasants are often very physically strong people from all
Yeah.
the hard labor they do. But that's sort of besides the point.
He
Most
is
of
Yeah,
human
yeah, yeah.
history, most people have lived very, very miserable lives. And a major thing that the kind of societies that he admires do is they either live on the steppe as nomads, or they find some way of simulating the open spaces of the steppe and of the nomads, whether that be through infanticide, to keep the
he uses
population low,
waterborne societies such as the Greeks.
waterborne societies where you have you know people
Numenor. Yes, yes,
people
yes.
having access to the sea. So
Yes.
that's another one. uh
Hey
Another
guys, you
one
know
is
what's funny?
high levels of internecine warfare, as in ancient Greece.
Hey guys, you know
um
what's funny?
uh-huh
Um, I come from a very maritime culture.
yes. Anyway,
Okay. Okay.
so
Sorry. Sorry.
so
Sorry.
so
I
a
just get
lot
really
of what
excited.
a lot
Okay.
of what the society he idealizes, they've tried to find ways of recapturing sort of the openness and the access to space that people have on the steppe and the like. And he sees ancient Greece as something that sort of approximates this in its very nautical character, and also in its decentralized character that kept the population a bit lower, and poorer agricultural land, which forced them to practice a mix of pastoralism and farming, and just sort of gave them a stronger, various factors came together to give them a stronger backbone of like independent farmers and sailors and things like that, which you don't see in a lot of societies like in the East, where things are more centralized and most people live um,
We have
much more
to
poorly.
we have to remember though that these things that Pap is saying, like, they're not exactly news to us, right? I mean, we know.
Yeah, this isn't news to us.
Yeah, we know,
it's
like,
it, it is it is
in fact, there's this Jewish American historian called Martin S. Malia, who um, who formulated um, uh, the idea of well, the correspondence really between the kind of revolutionary thought um, applicable or obtaining in a society as being diametrically opposed to the degree of individual freedom that it has. So Martin Malia said that the further east you go in Europe, the lesser the degree of actual political freedom, and the more increasingly gnostic the ideas, the revolutionary ideas at play. And I think that's a pretty good expression of how it.
which is ironic because there are a lot of deeply Gnostic threads throughout Bronze Age mindset.
Oh yes, there are.
There's
He
a
does
strong
glorify
sense that
Gnosticism.
not only does he have this sort of antinatalist mindset because it creates things like overpopulation. There are various points in the book where he says, it's better to not be born and stuff like that. It's honestly kind of dark. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let's go to
Oh, I was just gonna say this. It's kind of interesting that Terilien can really he has a god tier memory to me. Like he could read a third of Bronze Age mindset and remember more of it than me reading the entire thing. And it's like Terilien can read like a short summation of like Nietzsche's thought, and I could read whole books. And his like 20-page like thing of Cobblestone, he'll remember it more thoroughly than I'll remember like all of Nietzsche's books. He just has like insane memory accessibility.
My brain is a giant garbage pail, and everything ends up in there, and it's just a mess.
Hey, Terilien,
Uh huh.
isn't that like isn't that true of me as well? Fucking curse. I remember a lot of
I
remember
I
a lot
don't
of
know if
memories.
that's true. It's just that something I really noticed with him is that he doesn't necessarily read that widely, but you wouldn't know it because of he'll remember so thoroughly the summations of things that he reads that he punches a lot more weight proportionally than somebody that reads a lot.
Yeah, I'll read one book and then just remember what I read. Is just sort of how I roll.
What a fucking power move, dude.
I'm a lazy bastard. Anyway,
Good
Do you want
pop
to get
champ is
into the
what you are.
demonization of male friendship?
yeah, because that is not a part that I remember.
Okay, so like part of his whole concept of the gynocracy or the yeast society or area oriental despotism, all these things that are overlapping, is that they all share in common the demonization of male friendship and that tyranny always seeks to break up male friendships because in a sense the bonds shared between men are the strongest bonds that human beings hold, stronger than like the romantic bond between a man and a woman, and that men in their friendships are in and of themselves because of the strength of that bond are an existential threat to established civilization because because a man is most willing to die for his friend. Thoughts on that?
Well, that is true, and it goes back to what Aristotle said about how
That is true.
the foundation of the social order is philia and friendship between men.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the reasons why multi-ethnic societies don't really work very well because friendship is one of the major foundations of the social order.
I think that that's a primary
And
argument against
and women
the
and
emancipation
women
of women.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say that. Yeah. Um, women are to male friendships as acid is to non-galvanized metal, non-galvanized tin,
yeah. Um.
which is to
So
say that they're very corrosive.
so I think a major like summation of a lot of what uh we've gone over here is that none of this is really new
Yeah.
to us. Some people reading Bronze Age mindset, I don't know, maybe they found it especially mind blowing, and that was something that Knight Errant tried to explain to me. It's like this is really mind blowing to a lot of normal people, and I'm like, I don't know, man. None of this is new to me.
Yeah,
Well, you have to
dude.
remember
Of course,
is that
calm the
okay.
fuck on, man. Of course, it's not. Of course, it's not new to you. But think of it this way: would you rather people be introduced to a right wing thinking by reading Bronze Age Mindset, or um, by
Ben
Jordan
Shapiro.
Peterson's, yeah, Jordan Peterson's rules for retrogrades, right? I mean, what what would you rather have?
Rules for Retrogrades is by Timothy Gordon.
Whatever.
12
Who
rules for, is
cares?
it 12 rules for men?
12 Rules for Life.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, for
Okay,
life.
I
yeah.
mean,
12 rules for life. Yeah.
that is a false dichotomy, and you know it.
No, it's not. Um,
Go on.
so
I
like,
love it when people take my side. Thank you, buddy. Please go on.
okay, so the thing we have to remember is that what is the average, like if you total the number of books that every American reads, and like I think Americans might read more than Britons actually. I might be wrong, and I think Americans actually might read more than like a lot of European countries, but I could be completely wrong. Don't quote me on that. But like I think the average American, if you just total up everybody in mean, reads 7 books a year. But realistically, like the median is like 3. So to a lot of normies and people on Twitter, this really is the only exposure that they've ever gotten to a lot of things. And it's like, do you keep a tab of how many books you read a year? Nice meme fryer.
Yeah.
How many books did you read in 2022?
Um. So this is like exclusive of what I read for my thesis. I read, I think, about like 90 books. I think something like that.
And I'm not a professor or anything, right? I'm not an academic. But I read 58 books, counting real and audio books together.
Okay.
Which I don't. I mean,
I read a
I have
minuscule
kind of like,
fraction of that.
yeah, I have reading issues, but your fraction, Terilien, is far and above higher than what the normie reads.
Yeah.
And that I don't disagree with every single point made in Bronze Age mindset. I just think that his antinatalism and his antinomianism is just generally bad. But I think that a lot of normies that are only going to read 1 book a year, basically, or less than 5 books a year, if they do end up reading this, it's not necessarily going to be a bad thing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
we're
even
not
more.
we're not here to say that like, oh, BAP is like this tremendous danger who's going to usher in an age of Nietzschean terrors, to quote that freaking Persian Sohrab Amari, that
Yeah.
subversive Persian with the Chinese wife.
Oh wow, he even has a Chinese wife. Man, they. Okay. Okay. Go on.
What, Terillian?
Yeah, we're not here to give a kind of like incredibly alarmist critique of BAP. Serp and I just think there's a lot of really bad crap in there. And so there's something I said on Twitter yesterday. That's BAP is kind of the Pope Francis of the far right, in that he will say so many stupid, disgusting things. And there's an entire cottage industry of people who, when you point out, look, this is what he said, they'll just say you don't get it, that it's actually based, that you're cringe, or in the case of Pope Francis, oh, it's actually completely orthodox. And it's really, 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 really annoying. And the thing is BAP will repeatedly tell you who he is, right? Yes, lying is a good thing about your views, and Christianity was always kind of left wing. Conquistadors were not good Christians. It is good to have sex with Thai prostitutes. He'll say all sorts of things like that, or we need to make right wing porn and all sorts of things. And people just say you don't really get it when you point out that this is what he said and that it's bad. But there is a sort of moral panic around him, which is just kind of pathetic.
Which a lot of it's like a lot of the critiques of BAP I've come across like basically involves people, well, America first people just saying, "Oh, BAP is Jewish. BAP is Jewish. BAP BAP is a
Which is just
Straussian."
really, really annoying. I do think there is a very, very stultifying aspect to a lot of anti-Semitism,
Yeah,
where
yeah, it
it
is
just
like
it becomes a bit of a thought terminating cliche.
yes, TTC, TND, TTC. No, it's like,
Anyway,
oh, BAP is Jewish. BAP is Jewish, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay, and oh wow, BAP went to Yale and and add a Jewish professor. Wow, this has never happened to anyone
Yeah,
before.
it's not like Jesus had Jewish teachers.
Yeah. Oh
Do you guys want to
wow.
get into his concept of like martial superiority and like Prussia, Sparta, military
Yeah,
governments being the highest form of government?
Yeah.
Yeah, based. Okay, let's do it.
I mean, I don't think so. I kind of think the virtue in and of itself is most important, while the Chinese, the Confucian dislike of the military is actually a very bad thing. I don't think that Prussia and Sparta and other military governments are the best forms of government.
In fact, they're often notoriously militarily incompetent.
Yes, there's a tendency for states or militaries that have oversized influence over the government to be very incompetent militarily. This is pretty widely known, is that juntas are states governed by the military routinely lose to or militaries governed by a civilian government, and that kind of has to do with when the civilian government controls a military, they choose generals and officers based on meritocracy. But when a military controls the government, they pick officers based on friendship, networking.
Well,
And
and it's not
so,
just that. I mean,
go ahead.
what is the first thing a military that controls the government is going to do? Is they're going to abolish having to train. You know, they're going to go easier on themselves.
Which is what Arab military governments have always done and
Yep.
lost.
Yeah, so and I mean, for example, you have
We-
places like Sparta, right, which are highly militaristic societies. Honestly, an entire video could be done on just how incredibly overrated Sparta is historically.
Do you want to do that like sometime next week?
Yes,
Like, I need
sometime,
to.
but for now, if you want to,
Yeah.
if you want a
Okay.
good
Okay.
video on this, look up the Sparta Myth by Invicta on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like a normie YouTube channel, but it gives you a quick rundown of how Sparta's military record is really not that impressive.
It's not.
It's not remotely impressive. I mean,
You know, the country that has the most impressive military record?
allons enfants de la
Yep.
patrie.
Yes, it's
France.
it's the cheese-eating surrender monkeys. The
Yeah,
French.
we have the
Over
most impressive
Britain?
military record.
Followed by Britain, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, neither of which are are especially militaristic societies, and neither
Yeah,
of which were ever
they're not.
dominated by their militaries.
Yeah, they're
Um,
not. It's just
military rule is actually a time and time again is a recipe for incompetence and decadence. Just look at Tokugawa era Japan and how bad and how most of the samurai just became glorified pencil pushers and welfare queens.
Or just look at the entirety of South America. Like when's the last time they actually managed to do something?
Well, to be fair, international conflict in South America is like, I think it's the. To be fair to South America, they rarely have international conflicts.
Yeah, South America is a remarkably peaceful region.
Unless you get knifed by
Yeah, I
the
mean we mean
Internationally speaking.
okay. MS-13. Hoy loco.
They've
Hoy
been
We're not
defeated,
talking
though.
about crime.
MS-13 has been defeated, and now El Salvador
Yeah,
has a
so
lower crime
that
rate
was-
than the United States.
that was so base. Like
See how this ends. We'll see if another Operation Just Cause happens here pretty soon. I feel like he's going to be overthrown by the U.S.
destroyed.
Is there any other of these main concepts that you guys want to touch on more that we haven't touched on that much to yet?
No. I think that this is we've sort of touched on the main thrust.
There's only one more that I wanted to touch on.
Mhm.
is that was radical historical revisionism and kind of schizo stuff he has in it. Do you have anything else that you want to touch on? Nice meme fryer.
I would like to talk a bit about well, I would just like to mention that BAP's greater long form engagement, you will find that in his Caribbean Rhythms podcast and not in his tweets. But I do agree with Terilien, that BAP, just like Nick, BAP brings out the worst in a great many low IQ PUA people. Like he does do that.
One
There's
of the
just
absolute worst things on the far right is nerds LARPing as if they're Chads.
yeah, yeah. Which is look, I'm like way more of a Chad than a lot of these people, and I'm not even particularly Chadish, right? Would you agree,
No,
Tyrion?
but basically, there's a lot of people on the internet, pretending that. I mean, there's always been the internet tough guy. This has always been a thing.
Yes, but would you agree with the fact that I am kind of a Chad, Terry?
No.
Ooh.
Oh, fuck off.
I mean, firstly, if you were kind of a Chad, you wouldn't ask me.
The chat. What is the meme go of the version walks up to the door and talks to the girl, and he's like, "The right guy just knows," or whatever.
Oh gosh,
Man, you guys are so fucking mean to me, dude.
Rip.
you deserve it.
Yeah, I kind of do. Hugs. I love you guys so much.
Anyway, do you want to get into the schizo posting?
Oh yeah, that's a part of the book that gets ignored,
That's
but it's
that's
I
actually
want to
part of the
read
book.
one of my
Yeah.
favorite schizo parts in it.
Yes.
I think I'll start it here. I think that instead, in previous cycles, has varied, but has very often and most interestingly one cause, which is the emergence of brotherhoods of savage men who have decided to purify the earth and rid it of the manifestation of the human cockroach. Because unfortunately, in the long run, the development of civilization and comfort leads to the proliferation of damaged life. The innovation of mankind leads to unspeakable abortions of life, and men on the periphery who want to preserve the natural order begin to plot the end of everything. I also wonder if some ancient civilization has managed to escape all those cycles of destruction, has hidden underground somewhere. Maybe they are really eternal and live life as an experiment, detached, seeing it as a playful dream they can observe at a distance. Maybe an emissary surfaces from time to time so that they can amuse themselves. I shudder to think, though, that by the same reasoning, the aborted robot life to which the mass of mankind inevitably degenerates in each cycle of civilization has survived, maybe in some small communities of moles inside dried hills of limestone, or not far underground in old networks of caves and tunnels. No doubt, stories of vampires, kobold, and human cryptids, and many others might refer to these degenerated stragglers who prey on us and terrorize us, no doubt, among the ranks of deities have come from both types, and stranger things still exist under the earth. Please see Doros if interested. There are more things. So um, he literally is like Schaeferism is real.
basically what he seems to be saying here is that there are mutants left over from previous advanced stages of civilization, and these are cryptids and vampires.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
That is so base. That is so schizo. And I mean, it's not true, but it's awesome. I was going to say something really
Why are
weird.
you saying it's not true?
Fuck you.
Citation needed.
Anyway, so I need to interject here because I think this is a very common misconception on the far right. Civilization has actually had a eugenic effect. And firstly, I just have to point out the fact that hunter-gatherer populations and pastoral populations are routinely lower IQ than civilized populations. Although to BAP, IQ is not really like a good metric for.
He's anti-HBD or human
Yes,
biodiversity
but
research.
I think this is really important to note. You only really see civilization causing dysgenics when industrial civilization begins.
And even then, it's only
And
for like
even
a
then,
couple of
that's mostly
generations.
due to the differential fertility patterns
That's right. Yeah.
that are caused by contraception, which, you know,
And it kind of gets
ironically,
resolved, doesn't
things
it?
like, you know,
I don't know if vaccines and modern
yes,
medicine
yeah, the
caused
idea,
it prior
because the
to.
thing is smallpox and the like, they strike more or less randomly. It doesn't care what your IQ is or what have you. I know there are arguments to be made, but we're
Reducing
not going to
child
believe
mortality might have some influence, and that's because stupider people care less for their children, but keep in
Yes.
mind that dumber people still care less for their children, and higher levels of infant mortality are connected to intelligence to
the
this day.
irony is that this obsession with having space, arguably, if internalized, it just leads to upper class people having fewer children. And that's what really causes civilizational dysgenics. It's upper class people obsessing over providing each of their kids with a large enough inheritance, and so greatly limiting their births. But no, civilization has had a eugenic effect. I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you want to know more about that, I would watch. I would look up an article of the title, has the title "Genetic Pacification and Capital Punishment," and also "The 10,000-Year Explosion" by Gregory Cochrane and Henry Harpending. By the way, Gregory Cochrane and Henry Harpending are both they're both our guys. They're both our guys, and they're professionals. Anyway, I just wanted to say that because I think there is this very, very pernicious idea in these circles that civilization has, you know, degraded the purity and perfection of the Nordic race or what.
Of schizoism and his belief, and is heavily touching upon phantom time, historical negationism, and alternate chronologies, most prominently flamencoism, Christ myth theory, and Mohammed myth theory.
BAP is a staunch believer of Immanuel Velikovsky, I think. Um,
Which negationism is that?
um, I think what's
The revised chronology,
I
ages and
he's
chaos.
he's the he's the one of he's the guy that wrote Worlds in Collision.
Mm-hmm.
um and he wrote that, well, the he believed that Earth has suffered catastrophic events on like a pretty worldwide scale, including mass extinction events before and during mankind's recorded history, um, and that these were caused by close encounters um, with the other planets in the solar system. Um, yeah. Um,
He doesn't touch about that particularly intensely within Bronze Age mindset. He
yes.
touches pretty intensely on Christ myth theory, Mohammed myth theory, which I believe. I mean, Christ myth theory is thoroughly debunked within academia, which is
Yes,
thoroughly anti-Christian.
it is.
And Mohammed myth theory has never been taken with a shred of support anywhere.
I think what really discredited that anti-jihad guy, Robert Spencer, is when he started
Yes.
supporting Muhammad myth theory.
Mm-hmm. Because if Mohammed
Robert
mystery
Spencer
is
was.
real, then that basically means like the all of history prior to that doesn't. It's all non-representative and is like whatever.
I mean, like the thing about Robert Spencer is like he not only did he support the Muhammad myth theory, he wrote like a whole fucking book. It's called Did Muhammad Exist or something like that, and I bought a copy in 2015, I think, um, which I read and didn't really enjoy because I didn't find any of the arguments convincing. It was like
Well, that guy isn't even Catholic anymore. He's Eastern Orthodox. So
Yeah,
like did he used to be Catholic or
yeah, he used
he
to be a Melkite.
apostatized.
He apostatized because a Jesuit told him he had to be pro-Muslim to be Catholic.
okay? Why the fuck would you listen to what a Jesuit tells you?
Because he's a Melkite and probably wanted to apostatize anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
That's Melkites for you. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I have. I'm I'm kind of like I'm kind of like Tim. I'm kind of like Stark in this respect that I am kind of suspicious usually of the Easterners. I mean,
It's mostly just the Melkites. But anyway, let's not dwell on this.
yeah.
Yeah, so he also touches on I'm gonna say the name wrong. Flamencoism, which is an incredibly radical form of historical negationism.
It is so schizo. Go
Yeah,
on.
he's
It
based as
basically
fuck.
denies all of history prior to 1600 existed
Yep.
and correlates numerous historical events to be the same thing. It says like, doesn't it say the Roman Empire never existed and stuff like that?
He says something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he says like the Roman Empire never existed. Christianity was like created around like literally very closely prior to the Reformation.
Yeah.
Just kind of it's all over the place, and it kind of just it's pretty because it's Russian. It's pretty coherently, or you can kind of see through it as like saying that basically he says that Europeans created a fake version of history to try and obscure Russia being the dominant power through all human history. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
That is more or less what he says. Yeah.
Basically,
I mean,
all
which
of
is just
medieval
typical
and
Russian conceit.
early
So
and iniquity is a made up bullshit created by Western Europeans to cover up the fact that Russia is the premier world power in all of history.
Yeah, and BAP has a lot of sympathy for a lot of this kind of negationism, which is ironic because it kind of he shoots himself in the foot in the process.
Because he glorifies Greece as the highest attainment and of human history, but Greece completely gets slaughtered in flamencoism and other historical negations.
Yeah, I mean, when you engage in that degree of historical negationism, you kind of undermine yourself. But in his partial defense, BAP would say that he's, in response to that, that he's defending the idea of Greece, or he's defending the referent of, that he's defending what is being referred to, or whatever is the historical basis of Greece in that case. That's how you would defend that.
yeah.
But it's still you still are kind of shooting yourself in the foot. It is very, very, very schizo. I feel like a lot of people they'll read Bronze Age mindset and they'll get some sort of vitalism out of it, and they'll just completely ignore how unbelievably schizo it is. It's like BAP put that stuff in there just to test if people had actually read it.
And another thing about it is that it undermines himself pretty aggressively because he constantly refrains in his identification of vitalism by saying that higher means are possible. Look at the examples of Greece. Look at these great men from Greece. But if he performs this historical negationism, of which Greece is frequently a victim in these theories, all his examples of the higher goals attainable of man outside of, the mercenaries in Africa and the conquistadors that he uses as the great men. Like the vast majority of his examples come from ancient Greece.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to finish up and touch upon Caribbean rhythms and his presence on Twitter and its influence?
Yes, Jogger, let's do it.
I'm not that active on Twitter, so I don't know
I love
what
listening
he
to
does.
Caribbean rhythms. I love
Why
listening
is
to
it
Caribbean
appealing
rhythms
to you?
because it's funny as fuck. Like
Okay.
that's the primary reason. Oh, why do you dislike it?
I've never listened to it, so I can't really comment
I
on it.
dislike it because he just makes a lot of shit up. Like, I believe that Aryans reached India not by the Khyber Pass and Hindu Kush, but by the sea. Why? Because I like the sea. He just has a tendency to make things up constantly, or like, Jewish monotheism was actually stolen from Greeks because Greeks didn't mention Jewish monotheism when it should have existed. Yes.
I mean, a better version of historical realism is that the Jewish religion is influenced by the Egyptian religion, but I digress.
He's very he makes things up constantly.
Yeah.
That's a really important point, is that, and he explicitly says in Bronze Age Mindset that he doesn't have any issue lying to attain
For
his
the greater
goals.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, when people tell you who they are, listen. And I mean, that kind of undermines his entire book in the process. Yeah.
So,
So
yeah. So like, the thing is though, like, look, the reason why I love BAP is because I just do, and it's not because of what he says, or it's not really like I don't take any life lessons from him. I just find him incredibly hilarious to listen to.
that's fine. I just feel like I just wanted to comment on the book. I feel like Trillian's probably pretty pretty more extensively critical than I am.
Yeah.
I just think that he needs to be taken with a grain of salt, and sometimes his influence towards people that are not very widely read, he's a double-edged sword in that sense, in that he presents a lot of things that are very good to people that aren't widely read. The vitalism in and of itself isn't bad. The glorification of male friendship and virtue of the heroicism of like warriors is pretty good. Um, his criticism of like gynocracy can be pretty interesting. It's just that if he's your sole influence, he he can be kind of lacking, and it's just really important to be widely read. I know that a lot. Maybe I don't discuss with my fans that much. I know that there's this thing that you'll get with a lot of people that are trying to like give me some base books, people that read what are the base books of history so I can know what's based. And it's like, no, there don't believe in based history. Just read widely, and you'll be
Yeah.
able to see through. You'll be able to see things and develop your own worldview by reading widely.
And it needs to be noted that most historians, most academic historians, the most they'll be able to get away with these days is lying by omission.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? That's the same. You have, when you're dealing with primary sources, one of the things you need to do is one of the skills you need is to see past lies and biases and things like that. And that's what you're going to have to do if you want to learn history.
Um, I I want to expand on that right now. I'm speaking as someone who
You're a
is
literal
actually
historian.
yeah, yeah, like I am an academic historian, and I'm gonna get my PhD degree this summer. So, oh, what Terilien says is absolutely true. Like, part of learning how to do history is to mm, like
It's to
uh,
learn to see the truth
it's to learn
past
it's
all
to
the
learn
stinking
to
lies.
it's to learn to be true to your primary sources. Like, that's very important. You have to know how to write what you see in your primary sources. Like, there's just no way of getting around that. You know what I mean? Like, there's just
Hmm.
there's just no way of getting around that fact. Now, you will notice another thing, right? I mean, a lot of these bad historical books are not published by academic presses, but by popular presses, right? I mean, I
The
don't
problem is that people shop through Barnes and Noble for
exactly.
books, and so that they only have access to really recently published modern popular books. And
Yeah,
so that gives this idea that you're overwhelmed by the idea that you get this sense that history is like being destroyed by like feminist influence or other pernicious influences or ideological influence, but that's always been the case. And these modern popular books are going to be there for 2 years, thrown into a bargain bin and forgotten about. The older books which told the truth in the academic histories will stick longer.
yeah, yeah.
And the other thing about these popular books, if you just read one, you're going to hurt yourself. But if you read a bunch of books, the popular you'll end up being able to see through their lies within those popular books.
Yes, yes,
So much of the job of the actual historian is reading a bunch of bullshit, which most primary sources are. Most primary sources are basically written by the equivalent of journalists from the time.
okay. can i just
And
can
then
i
you
just
see
can I just try
past
to
that
explain?
bullshit and you piece together things through common sense and by comparing your
let me
sources.
just let me just give a very good example. Okay, Twitter is very old. All right, it's thousands of years old. People have been tweeting, people have been shitposting for like a very, very, very long time. The vast majority of primary sources are precisely that. They're tweets, by which I mean they're like large bowls of shit that you have to go rooting through in order to find
Yes.
something of value.
I'll give it as a callback to what we were talking about previously about Sparta. If you want to know why the history of Sparta is so problematic, imagine if hundreds or thousands of years from now, our only sources on North Korea were Maoist rebel news, alt right North Korean apologists,
and
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 South
the
Korean
one
propaganda.
and the one and the one North Korea Family Guy episode.
Yes, and South Korean propaganda. And the North Korean Family Guy episode would be, some play by
What's
Eratosthenes.
the video game where North Korea invades America? That would be one.
Wasn't it
Uh,
the Red Dawn
yeah,
remake?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was the Red Dawn remake, right? I was just about to say it. Oh, it's a Korea. Oh, it's a Korea. Oh,
The point is
it's a
that
Korea.
you shouldn't be trying to find based
Holy
history. Just find
Korea.
an academic history on a topic, maybe the Oxford or Cambridge history of something,
Always a great place to start.
and
Yeah.
then just read that. And you will have a very, very good understanding of the period. And you can always see past a lot of the issues. I think part of the problem with Bronze Age mindset, okay, is a lot of these people have never gotten an alternative perspective
Yes.
on a lot of historical topics.
Yes.
And it sort of presents these ideas that are really kind of, and this isn't even like meant as an attack on Bat, but really kind of obvious and basic bitch if you've done any extensive reading.
Yeah.
And they're just like, whoa, this is mind-blowing. So you're saying that, like, being a farmer was not that great historically? This is not like the right-wing shit that I've read before. And it's like, yeah, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know?
Yes.
Because it does say things from a right-wing perspective that a lot of, like, you know, crunchy cons aren't going to say.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, we all know that crunchy cons are just faggots who invoke things that are implicitly white, but are too embarrassed.
But are too
Yeah, like
embarrassing to afraid to
they'll
say it.
invoke things like natural or organic communities, which are, you know, implicitly white.
So I was kicked out from a university conservative club recently, because well, you know me, right? I'm the gadfly. Okay, I'm not saying I'm Socrates. I could be ugly enough to pass for Socrates, but I'm not actually Socrates. But I am something of a gadfly. So this guy, he was talking about, trad communes up in the Alps, right? And I went up to him and I asked him, "Well, buddy, what's going to be the ethnic breakdown of your trad commune?" And a cop, yeah, and then I was kicked out of the thing.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
yeah.
You know, it's funny. This was supposed to be a criticism of BAP, but I think it's just like a summary of BAM. So,
I would not have let it devolve into a
so
criticism of BAP. Okay, I love the guy.
what I will say, and this is sort of like a lot of his flaws are already well known, but can we just sort of quickly go over some of the concepts that require a bit more criticism?
So my
Hey.
list of the concepts that required more criticism: homoerotic misogyny, antinatalism, opposition to human biodiversity or race realism, cartoonish hatred of Asians, under criticism of Africans in that note, antinomianism, virtue versus the will to power, advocacy for right-wing degeneracy, and radical historical revisionism.
Yeah, so for example, he really hates Plato and Socrates, and he loves Alcibiades, which that speaks to a tremendous defect in his character. Alcibiades is a man who betrayed every single person he fought for. But, you know, he lived an interesting and beautiful and aesthetically pleasing life. And he was a beautiful man, so I guess that makes it okay. The antinomianism, you know, that's a huge portion of it. I mean, firstly, he frequently talks about, you know, fucking prostitutes throughout the book. And
Yes.
he doesn't have anything resembling a coherent moral vision. And I would say in general that the moral nihilism embraced by the far right and sort of the Nietzscheanism has actually been an absolute disaster for it. Especially since, you know, the left is winning by that metric.
I mean, look. That's the thing, right? I mean, the most degenerate shit that a lover of aesthetics, that a lover of the true, the good, and the beautiful will allow himself is, I don't know, get high on some glycine or whatever and fuck a Portuguese prostitute, right? By comparison, what the leftoids are doing is basically just cutting off peepees.
Yeah, I mean it's far worse.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's stuff like advocating right-wing porn. There's crap about how pagans should pretend to be Christians. Uh, to subvert it's there's a lot of really, really, really immoral shit in Bronze Age mindset. And what really, really bothers me is whenever you point this stuff out, like I said, it's like with Pope Francis and people defending the orthodoxy of a lot of his really problematic statements. People try to say, no, 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 it's based. It's based. You're just part of the longhouse if you want to get married and have kids and stuff like that. You need to increase your fuck rate. Women should just like get impregnated by studs. It's weird as hell, man.
Kind of interesting because I was reading through Beyond Good and Evil is that Nietzsche just kind of assumes that women will continue to be virtuous even if men follow his prescription of antinomianism, and it's like, no, women are just going to become degenerate single moms on OnlyFans, bro.
Yeah. I'm a single mom against single motherhood.
Yeah. Oh well.